Today, we talk about the tight end position. We reveal our tiered ranks along with some rookie pick values and some of the 2025 rookie tight ends. Stick around for all that and more. Hello, and welcome in to the Dino Construction Podcast. My name is JP. I'm joined here by David, our regular host, Justin. He has had some things come up, so he could not join us this week, unfortunately, but we're excited to kick off our ranking series here on the channel. We're going to start with the tight end position here. And David, what was some of your first thoughts when you looked at the tight end position?
Kind of the same thoughts we seem to have every offseason. Was not what we hoped. Maybe there'll be a little hope going into next year like there was last year. But yeah, a lot of these younger guys we had hoped for did not deliver. Pretty ugly after the top two. That's what I think.
Yeah, at least we got a new, really hot tight end, in this rookie class in this past year, just like we did the class before. And maybe we'll have that again this year. There's some interesting tight end prospects. Maybe we'll have two that break out. I don't know. The likelihood isn't that great, but there's still some interesting guys. Maybe they could be, tight ends take a little bit of time. Sometimes they break out year 2, 3. I mean, maybe year 5 if they're David Njoku. So yeah, still an exciting class. But let's go ahead and dive into our first tier here.
Pretty easy. And before I hop in, I just want to say we are putting some rookie picks in here. You notice between two tiers, some rookie picks missing. Basically just means we didn't want to include them in either of these tiers. So they're kind of ranked in between. Tier 1 here, obviously Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and we included the 101 and 102.
These two guys are fantastic. These are the tight end 1 and 2 on this season and on a points per game basis. And we go by 1.75 tight end premium scoring, just so that's clear with everybody. But I mean, Trey McBride, he's 25 years old. Brock Bowers just turned 22 years old. And the fact that these young guys are the top two tight ends, I think if you have either one of these guys, you're extremely happy. And it's going to take a lot to pry these two tight ends off of somebody's roster. But David, who would you rather have between the 101 and Brock Bowers at this point?
I think I got to go with Bowers if I'm being honest. Maybe if I have a big need at running back and I'm pretty happy with my other tight end, I could see it. But yeah, Bowers just looks like an absolute stud. We know what he is, or at least through 1 year of the NFL. We think we know what he is. We all love Janty, but there are still some question marks. I could see keeping the flexibility for now, but honestly, if it was offered, I'd probably still accept it today.
Yeah, I think in non-tight end premium formats, it might be a little closer, but I think it's Bowers for sure. And funny enough, I mean, I saw Ashton Genty was mocked by Dane Brugler to the Raiders, so he would join Brock Bowers in that scenario. And honestly, I don't think that's the most attractive landing spot, though, because, I mean, they don't even have a coach. We don't know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. They don't have a quarterback either. There's so many question marks there. But with all that, we're still that confident Brock Bowers as a talent. Doesn't really matter who's throwing in the ball. I think that's how we all feel. I mean, this last year, he had Gardner Minshew, and he was tight end 2 in his first year in the league. So got a lot of confidence in that guy. But the 102, I think, is probably the last asset here that I value. I think I'd rather have Trey McBride than the 102 right now in the tight end premium. You agree, though?
We honestly could have left 102 out, but the buying power and flexibility of a pick at this point in the offseason is pretty helpful. There's a case to be made to just leave it out, but I think in some leagues you could definitely swap 102 and Trey McBride. I think a lot of people probably have those valued pretty close.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If Ted McMillan gets a really good landing spot in the draft capital that we hope, he could be really exciting. But I mean, he could also fall to, the 10, 11 pick range and not get a great landing spot. Let's say he goes to the Cowboys. I don't think they would do that. But if he's with CeeDee Lamb, we're not going to be not quite as excited. It would still be fine, but not like we're going to expect him big numbers year 1 necessarily. But yeah, you'd be happy with any of these assets. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely. I guess that leads us to tier 2. You want to go ahead and read who we have there?
Yeah, I mean, and it gets murky pretty quickly. We have George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, and also we have the 108 and 109 in this range. And like you said earlier, we didn't want to just have a tier 2 of 103 to 107 because this is a tight end ranking show. So we would have that as maybe a 1B tier, but we just left it out because we want to talk about tight ends primarily. Who do you have at tight end 3, David?
Right now I guess I have Sam Laporta. Not a lot of conviction there. He did start very slow and kind of finished a little bit stronger, but still, I think, showed us that he's not the hammer we had hoped after his rookie year. He's still young. He's in a high-powered offense. Ben Johnson leaves. Maybe we have some more questions there. I think I'd prefer him to the other two, unless maybe if I was very championship ready, I might lean Kittle, but he's getting up there in age.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, he's 31.3 years old. He was the tight end 3 this last year, though, with 19.7 points per game, which that's a big gap from Laporta, who's at 13.7, 6 points per game. That's a massive difference. But like you said, Laporta he just started a lot slower, kind of left a sour taste in people's mouth. I think a lot of people they value the beginning of the season more than the totality of a season. Like overall, he did fine. But I currently also have Laporta at tight end 3 because of his age. Just to combine with what he did as a rookie, Laporta, and still being a top 10 tight end this year, he's not somebody you're as excited about as you were after his rookie season. And like you said, Ben Johnson, there's lots of question marks there, but he still will have Jared Goff. And I think the offense is still going to be good. Might take a small hit, but we still like him enough. I mean, there's not a lot of tight ends we really love, but the next guy that we also have here is TJ Hawkinson, who did not have a great year upon returning from that ACL. He's tight end 17 at points per game with 11.7. Mind you, that's only 2 points per game less than Sam Laporta. There's a lot of guys in that 11 to 13 points per game range. He had 0 touchdowns, which definitely impacted it. And of course, he was coming off that torn ACL. But yeah, talk about Hawkinson here because I know you guys are higher than I am.
A lot of it's just hope that he returns to his old form. His three previous top five finishes at the position, including, I want to say it was first in points per game last year and then maybe like third or fourth 2 years ago. And look, he's coming off an ACL injury where a lot of players do return to play in like 9 to 12 months, but the production doesn't typically come back for, a year and a half, 2 years. Still in a high powered offense, whether it's Darnold or JJ McCarthy, we think you'll have solid quarterback play. O'Connell's a good coach. I don't love him. Certainly after the first tier, we probably ran out of tight ends that we love, to be honest. But I believe he has a better chance than anyone we have in lower tiers to become not quite a hammer, but still someone who gives you maybe a slight positional advantage.
Yeah, and it is a little bit tough for me to see a real spike season from him when he's a third option. I think Addison's taken a step forward, but I mean, he's tight end 4 in keep trade cut. He was tight end 1 in points per game last year and tight end 2 in 2022. So we know that the guy's really, really good. The market seems to like him. And like you said, one of the torn ACL, he should be better next year. Still feel good with him as an asset overall. But with the picks in this range, do you value the 108 higher than all three of these guys? What are you thinking?
I think at this point in the offseason, I probably do. But realistically, like that might be the range that Tyler Warren goes. And then are you going to trust an incoming rookie over these three pretty proven players, even if they're not quite what we hoped or Kittle's a little older? I think right now I'd prefer the flexibility of the picks. It is slightly team dependent. Just what you can do with a pick versus one of these assets that people are a little bit down on compared to last year. I don't think you have as much flexibility there. So I think I would keep the picks at least 108, maybe 109. I know they're not very different, but at this point in the offseason, I feel a bit more confident in 108. We still need a few things to break right for 109 to be in that tier, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I mean at 108, there's also there's always the question for Travis Hunter. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna play corner, wide receiver? Is he gonna split? And I mean, who knows? You might get a guy like Luther Burden at the 108 who we really really like, or I don't know, maybe Caleb Johnson gets a really good landing spot. Maybe Buka gets a really good landing spot. The 109, yeah. I mean, maybe you also get one of those guys, but it's hard. Yeah, I definitely prefer the 108, obviously. And I think I take the 108 over Kittle and Hawkinson, but I think Laporta is who I value the most. I think I take the 109 over Hawkinson as well, but yeah, all obviously in the same tier here, so not a major difference.
this was definitely difficult to decide which picks to put in here. Certainly not on a rebuild. You're not going to trade 108 or 109 for Kittle, but if you're competing, you're probably at least considering it. Hawkinson, like you said, coming off the injury, it's a little hard to pull the trigger on that, but I do think the value could be there this time next year. You could look back on it and say, oh, that maybe not won you your league, but certainly improved your team enough that you could be in position to win it.
Yeah, it's just hard to see any of these guys as hammers outside of George Kittle. I mean, we have seen it from Hawkinson, but I think Addison really, really impacts things there. But I do think Tyler Warren could be in this tier potentially if he does well at the combine, gets a good landing spot, top 20 draft capital. I've even seen he's like the number 14 prospect on some big boards, so maybe he goes top 15 positional value. I think it's probably more like top 20. Yeah, I might take Tyler Warren over Hawkinson at some point, maybe, but I don't think over Laporta or Kittle because I could see him falling at tight end 5 or 6, somewhere in between tier 2 and tier 3, probably.
Yeah, landing spot is huge for tight ends. You need them somewhere with opportunity and creativity, typically. So if he gets the right spot and has a great offseason, he could definitely be somewhere in the middle of this tier. If it goes the opposite way, he might not belong in this tier, though. So a little bit of risk, but that's kind of why we did picks instead of players, just because we're at that point in the offseason.
Yeah, we don't know. He could be 108 in a 1.75 with a really nice landing spot. He could be 111, 112. We don't know yet, but that dude's a beast. I think he's gonna be good. But moving on to our tier 3, David, who are the guys we got here?
Yeah, so we got Mark Andrews, David Njoku, Tucker Craft, the 112, and an early second. We put a plus on it. Probably can't get these guys for an early second. Maybe you could get Njoku. Maybe you find someone a little down on Andrews. But we just put a plus on there because we think you probably have to add a little bit more to get there. Solid tier, though. A lot of production in here. A little bit of upside with Craft. Are you taking any of these guys over the 112 straight up?
Man, I honestly like David Njoku. I mean, he was tight in 400 points per game, just behind Kittle at 17.9. And it wasn't an amazing situation. That was some of Deshaun Watson's, some of DTR, some of Jameis, and he missed some games also. So he didn't finish as tight end for the end of season total. But combine that with what he did at the end of 2023, I don't know. I think the guy is good in the 112 and 1.75 tight end premium. I might lean in Njoku. Not quite Andrews. I think they're very, very close. But do you like Andrews more than Njoku? I can understand if maybe you did because we've seen him be great for a really long time. But he's just 1 year older than Njoku.
You're probably right that I should view them equally. Probably just the previous history of Andrews. I still value him slightly above. I'm also really worried about the Browns quarterback situation. I mean, Watson just tore his Achilles, so he's not going to be their starter, but he ties up a lot of their assets. So are they going to draft someone? Are they going to maybe bring Cousins on a vet minimum? Is it Winston again? Is it DTR for a season? That'd be pretty bad. So just the question marks there. And I know Andrews had an awful start to the season, but he did come on pretty strong at the end. He's coming off a pretty nasty ankle injury too. I think Andrews is pretty solid. I'll be honest, if I have to spend a first, I might spend it on Kraft in this tier. I think he has the lowest floor, but I also think he has the highest ceiling remaining. It's maybe not anywhere near a guarantee that he'd hit it, but that Packers offense kind of needs some of their playmakers to take a step forward. We had hoped that that would happen this year. It didn't really. I mean, Kraft definitely took a step forward from where he was last year, but still has a lot of room to grow. Just the upside, I would probably prefer the 112. But if you were asking me to trade Kraft for one of these two guys on a competitor, I might do that as well. So just more muddiness in the tight end ranks.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue there's 4 targets ahead of him, and he still flashed and had some really, really impressive plays with long touchdowns, showing his yak ability, and also making some incredible catches. I saw him make some one-handed catches that were really, really good. So if I mean, we got Christian Watson with a torn ACL here at the end of the year. Romeo Dobbs keeps getting his head hit. Oh man, like that was nasty in the playoffs. He had the guardian cap on. Looks like he got a concussion, and Wicks hasn't really taken a step forward either. Reed's been up and down. So I think Kraft, he at least has a chance, especially with the Christian Watson injury, which should probably linger like half of the 2025 season, maybe. I don't know. It was a January torn ACL. So 9 months out, you're at October. Maybe they play conservative and bring back November.
Yeah, I mean, he could miss the whole season even. It's hard to tell at this point. So at this point in the offseason, too, we hear the Packers linked to T. Higgins, maybe Devontae Adams for a homecoming. So if they add an alpha receiver, that probably has to lower Kraft a smidge. But we've seen that type of tight end in the Shanahan offense do very well. I don't think he's going to be George Kittle, but he's kind of in that neighborhood of, an excellent blocker, someone you keep on the field all the time, really good with the ball in his hands, tough runner. So I don't know. I do like his upside still. Yeah, if you're competing, you probably prefer Njoku or Andrews.
If this year was an audition, he definitely got the role for getting more touches because he was really great when they did go to him. But I mean, with Andrews, I want to go back to what you said. He was better later in the year. I think it was from the first 4 weeks were pretty rough, but from week 5 on, like he was tight end 5 or 6 moving forward from that point. So he was good. Once we got past that stink of the early season, he was good. Don't think this tight end 11 points per game finish like the margin between tight end 11 to tight end 7 was. I mean, Laporta's tight end 9. He was 0.2 ahead. So I mean, it was such a small margin for these guys. So if you give him 15 points per game from that point forward, I don't know exactly what it is. I don't have it in front of me, but we know what he's capable of, and he's had great seasons. But yeah, I just think the reason I'm so high on Njoku is because I think at the end of that 2023 season with Joe Flacco, I think that the team and Stefanski just saw just like, wow, okay, this guy seems like he leveled up. Our offense is doing really great when we're going to him too. He seemed like he really had a breakout and really established himself. And I think that put him more in the game plan. And I think that translated this year. I mean, tight end 4 points per game and not a great offense. So I just think he's really good. Of course, they could bring in a big time wide receiver, take some targets away, but tight end's pretty murky at this point. So
Sure is.
I'd be happy with him.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Something I was going to bring up is Browns, if they have the ability, should probably bring in more receiving help. Can they bring in someone who takes away targets from Njoku? Maybe not. Like we said, their assets are pretty tied up, but there's just so many question marks around him. The name value isn't what Andrews is. So
Mhm.
that's why I lean him between the two. But, if you're starting either of these guys, you're not too upset with your tight end position. Obviously, you're not thrilled about it, but most teams would be happy to have one of these guys to slot in there at their tight end spot.
Yeah, I just think I'm viewing the Njoku, the whole puzzle of it is just like similar to Brock Bowers. I just think he's just that good that no matter what the quarterback system or whoever's there, whatever the system is, I think there's going to go to him. Of course, Bowers is a different level, but I just think Njoku showed that he's just really, really good, and that's why I feel pretty confident in him. But I definitely understand sticking by Andrews there. But moving on to our fourth tier, David, who do we have here in this smaller tier?
Yeah, this one was a little hard for us to populate. We got Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, mid-second plus.
Blech.
Yeah, like these guys we were really high on. They just haven't done what we hoped. A lot of people looking at this mid-second plus are probably going to disagree. Like, are you really going to pay much more than that for these guys?
I'm not. I mean, the 201, 202, I don't think I'm sending that for Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid. Maybe the 204. I mean, mid second plus, that's kind of right where we're at that point. So, I mean, Kyle Pitts is really hard for me to have any confidence in him because ever since his rookie year, it just seems like he's gotten worse. And the offense was pretty good this year, and they barely went to him. I know Drake London's great and all. Mooney had a good season, but tight end 24 in points per game, man, it was rough. And he had a lot of games where he was not involved at all, getting one target, two targets. He might have even had a game where he had none. I would not be surprised at all. But Kincaid, I at least have a little bit of hope for since that was only his second year. Similar to Kyle Pitts, I mean, Kincaid had a good rookie year, and then it seems like he's regressed. I don't really know what to do with these guys. They're young, and we know they're talented, and they've had shown us certain things in the field when they're young. But it's just really hard to think that I'm going to go into the season with these guys as my tight end one. I would not feel confident at all.
Yeah, I suppose if I had to pick one, I'd probably lean Kincaid because we've seen Kyle Pitts disappoint more, and Kincaid was pretty hurt this year, so maybe you can chalk it up to injury. But even before he got hurt, he was pretty disappointing. If I have to slide one of these guys in at my tight end one spot, I'm going to try to back it up with a pretty good veteran I can trust and just kind of hope for the best. But yeah, I'm not going in with one of these guys as like my only startable option. I just don't think that's going to be a recipe for success.
No, absolutely not. It's hard to envision a breakout for Kyle Pitts anymore, honestly. But I mean, who knows with the David Njoku thing? It took him a while, it took Evan Ingram a while. But I just don't see like with Kyle Pitts, he doesn't have that juice that like David Njoku does as like a yak guy. He doesn't show me these things that are like, wow, that's where he can really win as a yak guy. I mean, even contested catch, it doesn't seem like he's huge, and they don't really throw it up to him that much. You would think, oh, he's on a linebacker, he's going to win this. Let me just toss it up to him, but they don't really do that, and I just think that speaks volumes to what he's capable of. I just think he's fine. And like I said, maybe there's a breakout there, but it's really hard for me to see.
I would imagine the hype has cooled on him pretty much everywhere. I think people that believed in Pitts have been burned too many times now. I am one of those people. Pretty much each of the last like 3 seasons, I've had him somewhere and thought, oh, this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year. And then by the end of the year, you look back and you're like, man, he wasn't even really startable.
Yeah.
And like we all gave Arthur Smith so much crap for using Jonnu Smith over him. And like we'll talk about Jonnu in a second, but it's hard to blame him at this point, seeing how those two have progressed. Jonnu had an excellent season and Pitts did not.
Yeah. I think that if I have him, I'm looking to tier up to tier three, honestly. And I would add a second, that's for sure. And I'm not just adding a late second, I'm adding mid to early ish. I'd add like 2-0. I mean, we said that for that grouping, they're worth around a late first, early second. And Kyle Pitts probably somewhere near mid second. So, I mean, I'd take like 206 Kyle Pitts, see if I can get one of those guys because I just don't feel confident starting him. I mean, is that too rich for you?
I think I can get on board with that. If you're a little asset poor, I might hold on to it just to see how the season progresses, just to see how the off season progresses. But yeah, I mean, I'd feel much better with someone in tier three than either of these guys here in tier four, and a mid second as the price to switch it is not much. So I think I definitely get on board with adding a mid second to either of these two to go up to tier three.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'd be trying to do for sure. But moving on to tier five, we have a much, much bigger group here. And we have Travis Kelsey, Jake Ferguson, Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, Dallas Goddard, Pat Fryermuth, Cade Otton, and we also have mid to late second. There's some guys here that I'd feel much better starting than the guys in tier four. First of all, Travis Kelsey, obviously. He was tight end 6 this year on a points per game basis. Still a pretty good start, but he's definitely getting up there in age, and it's really hard to see projecting him more than just this next season, 2025, which even then, we don't know for sure. He could retire after this year. but he's tight end 15 on points on keep trade cut. He's tight end 15. He's 35.3 years old. I don't think you can really move him, but
Do you think if we knew he was going to play this year, we'd have him at least tier 4, maybe even tier 3?
I don't think I'd have him tier three personally, just because I mean Njoku and Andrews. Njoku was a little bit better this year. Andrews, I think, and this if you look from week 5 on, I think he's probably just as good as Kelsey, and you're getting much more time. But tier four, I mean, it's a weird fit with those young guys. But honestly, I'd probably value him pretty similarly than those guys. But yeah, I think the question mark of if he's even playing next year is definitely a real one.
Yeah, I think he's probably got to be a hold for now, unless you get an offer from someone, assuming he's going to play this year. Because, like you said, we just don't know. And even if he plays this year, it definitely could be his last. I still think the production, though, is hard to replace at this position. So I could understand spending like an early second on him if you have the need and you're competing and we know he's going to play. You know, some of these other guys are probably cheaper production, like Johnny Smith. I actually had more points per game than Kelsey. I think his contract is such that he should be back in Miami. I'm not positive. I think they have one more year before they can comfortably move on. And then, you know, a bunch of these other guys have question marks due to injury this year, or with like Otten, he had a really hot stretch there, but then he kind of cooled off, and that was without Godwin. Goddard, we've got a run heavy offense. Grant Calcaterra looked all right. Ingram, Strange looked all right, pretty good actually when Ingram was out.
Yeah, he actually did. But Jonnu Smith, he is under contract for 2025. He had only signed a 2-year, $8 million contract, so they're only paying him, you'd say, $4 million this year. They're definitely going to keep him around at that price for the impact that he had was as much as their big time wide receivers, honestly. Yeah, Goddard though, he was tight end 10 in points per game. I mean, he's just struggles to stay healthy this year, pretty much every year. I don't know why he's so injury prone, but when Devonta Smith, I think, missed some time, Goddard stepped up in a big way. He had some really big games. It is hard because that was when he's out. When Devonta Smith was out, which you can't project moving forward. He's a little bit older, not like Travis Kelce, not getting quite that range, but I think I'd probably start Pat Fryermuth over him. And also Muth, I mean, he's a lot more available. He doesn't get hurt nearly as much. He was tied in 14 points per game, 12.8. He's solid. You don't really want to start him, but you can. And I don't really think he's really going to be able to elevate much past that. A back end tight end one, maybe he's got like a bigger touchdown season, but this is not a team that I think is really trying to feed him a lot of targets.
Yeah, and we don't know who their quarterback's going to be with the way their receivers played, including Pickens, but especially after Pickens. Got to think they're going to try to address that room. I do agree that, you could do worse than starting Fryermuth. But like you said, it's not like they're trying to make him a big part of the offense. So, it's kind of like everyone in this group. They're going to have some spike weeks that help you win some weeks, but overall, you're going to feel like you can improve that room.
Jake Ferguson, he had a disappointing season, but I think there's something off with the Cowboys all year. And then, of course, Dak got hurt midway through this season. So I think for the most part, I'm kind of throwing it in the trash, but also tight end 20 points per game. It is a little bit discouraging. So I'm at least consider that going into next year. But I think he could be a guy that bounces back into getting back in tight end one numbers. And he's a younger guy. And I think the offense could be a really high flying offense. We've seen it before. I think they were in points scored. They were like a top 5 offense for 2 or 3 years prior to this year. So we know what they're capable of over there. And, he could be tight end 7 or 8 with a strong touchdown season. I think he's capable of that in that offense. There's question marks there. Mike McCarthy is seemingly on the way out. Question marks, just this is that time of year. There's just question marks everywhere. But Evan Ingram, I want to point out just how good he actually was this year. I mean, not phenomenal, but he was tight end 8 in points per game. So I think he's a guy that you can feel pretty good starting. And I believe he only had 1 touchdown in that stretch as well. So I think that if I'm trying to find a guy that I'm buying low on, which you pointed out, keep trade cut on him, I got to scroll just to find him. He's tight end 17 on keep trade cut. And I definitely value him above that. I know he's a little bit older. He turns 31 in the beginning of this upcoming season, but in 1.75 tight end premium, he gets a lot of receptions, not a lot of touchdowns. He's never been a big touchdown guy, but I feel better starting him than Fryermuth, Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goddard, pretty much everybody in this range except for Kelsey and maybe Jonnu.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I enjoyed starting Johnny this year. It's hard to know if he'll have the same role next year, but like, why would you change it? I guess. So I think I'd probably pick him to start out of this group if I had to. And let's be honest, it's not like we're looking at youth in this group. So that's kind of all we're looking at here are points. So I like Jonnu the most out of this group. But yeah, Ingram has been excellent in the past. Hopefully, their new coach is going to upgrade that offense. We might get some more target competition, I guess, just by getting healthy with Christian Kirk, you're going to. But Ingram has shown even with Kirk healthy, he's still, I mean, honestly, the preferred target over the middle. So you could do worse with Ingram. I think, honestly, my bigger concern is Strange, who definitely looked good with Ingram out. I don't think he takes the job from him by any means, but if he takes some snaps and takes some targets, then that could cost him, a few points per game, which, at this point, at this position, a few points per game is kind of big.
Yeah, it's very big, and he was actually pretty darn impressive. Like, not gonna lie, I think his first read target share was like one of the highest in the NFL for a couple of weeks. It was ridiculous, but I mean, he was going into his second year, so for him to take a step forward and show some flashes like that, it's definitely something that's got to be in the back of your mind when you're considering Ingram for next season. Is there anybody else in this tier that you want to talk about? I mean, you touched on Otten a little bit, and he had a really, really impressive stretch there when Godwin was out.
He did have a great stretch, and I think he's even as high as like tight end 11 still right now in keep trade cut. But just like when we went through this, I'm sure point totals are pretty muddy for like their value. Yeah, he's tight end 11, but he's pretty darn close to like Johnny Smith in total value, anyways. If you can sell him at tight end 11 value, go for it. If you got to start him next year, you're probably not too upset with it. He really cooled off at the end there, and I expect Evans and Godwin to be back. No, that's not a guarantee. I would try to sell him if I could. I don't know.
I would try to sell him for Janu. It might be, you hear the name or whatever, but Janu, shoot, tight end 5 points per game. Kate Otten, I mean, they had the impressive stretch, but it was a much longer period of time for Janu Smith. He's older, but I mean, he could be a hammer. He kind of was down the stretch, and
Yeah.
Godwin, we don't know if he's going to be back. If Godwin's not back, he really could see a much bigger role next year. He could be a top 12 tight end. I mean, we've seen he's got that talent. He could rise even higher. But I think the community as a whole probably thinks that Godwin's coming back. I think he's coming back. And at this point, I think this is the perfect range to put him in just because there is some upside.
Yeah, and I think another thing about Jonnu is Tyreek Hill said he wants out. I don't know how serious he is. Contract's really hard to move, so I don't know that he's going to leave. But I mean, if Tyreek Hill leaves, then Jonnu Smith might even have an improved role from this year. And then, we're talking about him as a top 5 tight end probably next year, and you can get that for cheap. That's great.
That's a great point. I also point out on the flip side that Tyreek had wrist injury. I think might have needed surgeries playing through, so maybe Tyreek will be better next year. But Tyreek's getting older. He also said that he said that he's going to play for 3 more years, and that was that 2 years ago now, 2 seasons ago. I know that he was just speculating at that point. He spoke very confidently, but you can never say for sure. I don't know what he's going to do. He's got a lot of kids too, so
He sure does.
he's going to be paying a lot of money in child support.
I'm sure, yeah. Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's hard to get a read on that guy for sure. I think when he said 3 years left, people maybe overreacted a little bit. 3 years is hard to project for anyone. Think about what you were doing 3 years ago, and are you where you thought you'd be right now? Are you who you thought you'd be? I mean, hopefully, but
I was just moved to the state of Florida here from Virginia 3 years ago, and I've been established here now. It's crazy. Anyways, yeah, great point. But moving on to our last tier here, tier 6. David, who do we got here?
Yeah, this is another ugly one. Cole Kmet, Isaiah Likely, Ben Sinnott, JT Sanders, Noah Gray, and an early third. Now, a little bit of production with Kmet. He was kind of like Otten, where he had a really nice hot streak but cooled out. And we just don't love that offense. He's probably not going to move up on the ladder in target share. So that's why we kept him in tier 6 instead of 5. And there's some upside guys that we don't love, but they have the potential at least to improve their role and make a name for themselves. So of that group, other than Komet, who's your favorite in that group there? Likely Sanat, Sanders, and Gray.
Oh man, to pick a favorite from this group, I guess I got to go with JT Sanders because as a rookie, he did do pretty good very early on. He couldn't get on the field, but then there were some weeks where he was very involved. And I think that if we do see him take a step forward, he could be a guy that we're pretty interested in. And he's only 21 years old. I want to confirm that. I know he came in very young. Yeah, he's 21.8 years old right now. So he came in very young. He was a prospect that we really, really liked overall, but then he fell in the draft a little bit. So we cooled on him. But at this point, if I'm seeing some flashes, the draft capital I start to care less and less about. But a guy where the draft capital we kind of have to lean on is Ben Sinnott. He did get second round draft capital. He's picked 53 overall. And that's what really got us excited in a rookie draft because at the combine, he did really well and great draft capital. I know he's somebody that you're a little bit more interested in than I am.
A lot of it has to do with the narrative that I think provides some value insulation. Almost the top 50 pick, he just had 53rd. Had a lot of hype going into last season. And then he got, Zach Ertz. He had to sit behind him for a year. The ageless wonder. It's kind of silly because Senate has done nothing to show us he can be Trey McBride, but I hear that comparison made a lot because of Zach Ertz. If Ertz moves on, Senate gets the role as the starter. We've got a young quarterback there, a high powered offense. Other than Terry McLaurin, not a lot of target competition. So I can see the offseason going very well for him. And you might even be able to profit before the season starts, which with a guy like that, I really like to do because if you buy him now and then sell him for a profit before the season, you're guaranteed that profit. If you buy him now and wait till the season, it could definitely become a bigger smash for you, but you could also just have burned whatever you paid for him right now. So I don't love him, but I do think there's a little more backing up his value, a little more insulation there. So he would be my pick from those four. Likely and Gray, we kind of need the guy ahead of them to move on.
I was just about to point out, and it's shocking to me. Isaiah Likely on Keep Trade Cut, he would be their pick in this tier because he's tied in 12 over there. I think he's a good player. I really do. I think he's flashed as a yak guy. They throw him screen passes. I think he's got really good ball skills too. So in his contract is he's got one more year. 2025 is his last year under contract, and I think that's kind of what you got to hope. He's just a handcuff right now. That in 2026 you're hoping gets moves on to a new team, has a big role. But that's why we have him in tier 6 because that's a long ways away. But he came out. He had 32.8 points in week 1 in this scoring format, and everybody was hot and heavy over this guy. The fall that he's had since then, man, it's drastic. But he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games where he has 2 targets or less. You just can't rely on him. You really, really can't because Andrews is the guy there. Say Flowers is good. They even use Bateman quite a bit too. So at best, he's the 4th target. I don't think he's somebody that you can feel confident starting unless there's an Andrews injury.
Yeah, he's someone the rare tight end handcuff that I kind of like to have. If you have Andrews and you have Likely behind him, then you know that you at least have your starter every week, but their bye week. Like you said, he's really good with the ball in his hands. He had that crazy spike week in week 1. We thought maybe he was going to take off and take the job from Andrews. Tight end 12 is crazy. I noticed that too. If
Yeah,
you can sell him
crazy.
for anywhere near that price, please do.
And that week 1 spike should have been better. That toe in week 1, it's hard. It's a long ways away, but his toe was out by an inch, and he would have had 40 points pretty much. I think the mathing there with 1.75. I don't know how many yards it was, but yeah, he would have 40 points. That's remarkable, which that just goes to speak to how great he could be potentially one day. I think that he probably does have a bright future, but 2025, I don't really see it that year. But the last guy that really has me interested here, Komet, he is pretty interesting if Keenan Allen does leave and Caleb Williams takes a step forward. But Noah Gray, I thought he showed some things. And it's not a great offense anymore, but it's a good offense. He's got a great quarterback, and he had some weeks where he looked like he was one of the top 2 or 3 targets. You kept thinking, oh yeah, Kelsey caught the ball. Oh no, it's not him. So I think that he is interesting if Kelsey, like we mentioned earlier, he could retire after this year. I think it's really hard to see Kelsey playing into 2026. I think 2025 next year it's very realistic. I don't know. But I think Gray, he's kind of the handcuff. He's a very similar to the Isaiah Likely situation, honestly.
They've drafted guys, they've brought guys in, and I think pretty much any time you get the potential heir to Travis Kelsey, he gets a little buzz. Gray's actually played well though, which
Yeah.
can't really say that about the other guys that have gotten buzz. I think he's almost 26 though, so it's not like he's super young. There's always the possibility they bring in someone else if Kelsey retires, but there's not many people, especially in this tier and below, that you could buy now and make a pretty good profit over the next month or two. Kelsey does retire, you could probably sell him for double what you buy him for today. Definitely risky. That's the game we play. You gotta make some bets to make the money. So I wouldn't be against trying to buy him in hopes that Kelsey retires. Worst case, you burn a third and you've got a backup tight end somewhere on your roster.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Komet, He's a solid player though, but I don't think anybody's all that excited about him. Do you see him potentially having a real breakout season?
I kind of think what we saw this year is the best that you're going to get from him. Maybe a few spike weeks here and there, but he's not a main target. I don't think he's ever going to be. And I think Adunze takes a big step forward, even if Keenan Allen leaves. I guess especially if Keenan Allen leaves. I don't think Allen leaving gives Komet a tremendous boost, probably a little one. But yeah, I just don't see him ever being a reliable starter.
Yeah, I agree. And before we exit our tight end talk here, I wanted to bring up some of the tight end prospects I mentioned earlier with Dane Brugler's mock draft that he had. He had Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland in the first round. I mean, if Colston Loveland goes in the first round, where do you think he slots in?
Definitely depends on the landing spot, but I would say at the lowest is tier 4. If he gets the right landing spot and we get hyped up on him, I could see maybe sneaking into tier 3, but those guys have proven themselves. So I kind of think tier 4 would make the most sense. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's exactly where I had my mind as well, which we have mid second there. I kind of have him as a mid second now. Maybe I'll have him at 203 if he does get first round capital and does well at the combine and everything. So it kind of be right on that edge, like you said, depending on landing spot. But he had two other tight ends on round 2, and that was Mason Taylor, which I thought I was like, oh, maybe we need to talk about him a little bit more. But also Harold Fannin, who was in our mock draft that you took, which guy was a beast, just not in the power 4, unfortunately. But I think he could be great. I think those guys, maybe one of them could rise into tier 4. Like you mentioned, Fannin. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that he does rise to a mid to early second round pick, close to Loveland range. But Mason Taylor, I mean, maybe he belongs to be in the back end of a second. I think both those guys are probably put around tier 5 right now, though.
If Taylor does go tier 2 or round 2, then we're probably going to have to improve our outlook on him a little bit. He's definitely someone I've not looked enough into, if I'm being completely honest. But Fannin, I think this process from here to draft day is going to be incredibly important for him. I could easily see him being in tier 4, though, if he gets the right spot, the right draft capital. I could even put him above Loveland, depending on how it all falls. I don't think he's as safe of a prospect, but tight end is ugly. You're kind of shooting for the moon or buying some cheap points. At least that's my approach. So I would prefer the upside of Fannin if the draft capital is similar and we're happy with the landing spot.
Man, Harold Finn has been so interesting to me since a few months ago. And if he really can weigh in the 240s of the combine and he goes, I think then at that point he's a better prospect pre-draft than Ben Sinnott. And if he goes around that range, 50, we said 53, I think he probably is a mid second round pick. And the landing spot's juicy. I mean, I imagine if the Chiefs took him in the round 2 or something like that, which wouldn't be 53, be a bit later. Yeah, we were pretty hot and heavy about him for sure. But like you said, we've thought that about guys that come to the Chiefs a few times, but I don't think they've had a guy the caliber prospect that he is. I mean, Wiley was interesting, but what was he, a day 3 pick or something? So I think it's a little bit different story there. But those are the 4 rookie tight ends I got my eye on. Is there anybody else that you got in mind, or is that about it?
I think as far as especially immediate fantasy impact, those are probably it. But this time last year, Ben Sinnott was considered a day 3 pick, not really on the fantasy radar. I mean, people knew of him, probably calling him a sleeper. But I know the Packers, in a bunch of mock drafts, people had him going in like the 5th or 6th round of the Packers and projected him as a fullback / tight end. So anything can happen between now and the draft. There's probably going to be a name or two that rise up the ranks. And, hopefully we get a little more hope for the tight end position because right now it's ugly.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that the rise for tight end for the 2025 prospects, it usually comes at the combine time because we know that athletic testing is one of the most corollary things to success for some reason for tight end, much more than any other position. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the combine for running backs and tight ends specifically. But yeah, we're not too far out from that point. We're in the off season time now, which is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I love this part of the season. Always like watching football too. Don't get me wrong, but it's exciting to build up that hope and look into these new prospects and learn about them and their stories and who they could become in the NFL. Always fun to talk draft players. That's one of my favorite parts of being a fan of the NFL.
Yes, I mean players going to new teams, we got new faces and all of that. It's all so exciting, and we're planting our flags on guys, taking our shots, hoping that we swing and hit on a guy like Lad McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. because those are the things that we remember most. So yeah, I'm very excited for sure. But that does it here for us, guys. Thank you guys for joining another episode of the Dino Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you view. And from all of us here at Dino Construction, until next time.